My fiancée cheated on me with my stepbrother, saying she always loved him, so I disappeared and ruined her life. What's up, Reddit people? I suppose most of us go through life assuming that the people sleeping next to us have at least a basic moral code. We trust that blood and altar promises mean something. I am writing this late at night, sitting in the shop with a black coffee in hand and the smell of motor oil floating in the air. I need to document how the deepest betrayal a man can receive ended up becoming the perfect fuel to build the life I truly deserved. I am not looking for you to feel sorry for me. I come to leave a manual on how absolute coldness is the only valid arsenal when your own people decide to stab you in the back. My name is Javier. I am 29 years old and my profession is being a mechanic specializing in computerized automotive diagnostics. My job is not getting my hands dirty changing tires. My job is connecting a scanner to the central computer of a high-end vehicle and reading the error codes that no one else can see. I analyze live data, injector pressures, and millimeter-level sensor faults. That profession teaches you not to get carried away by external noise. If an engine sounds bad, the owner panics and screams, but I don't. I isolate the sound, measure the tolerances, and find the rotten part. That same analytical capacity was what prevented me from doing something crazy the day I discovered that my family and my marriage were a complete sham. I had been in a relationship for 5 years and engaged for one with Carolina. She is 27 years old and worked as a real estate agent for a luxury property firm. Carolina was the exact definition of someone who lives for the display window. She needed to always look impeccable, drive a car we could barely afford, and associate with people who had more money than us. I, being a pragmatic and silent guy, assumed that her obsession with status was just a tool for her job. I loved her, and since my shop generated excellent income, I decided to give her the life she demanded. I paid the deposit for our downtown apartment, financed a large part of her expenses, and started paying for a wedding that was going to cost around $30,000, just so she could show off in front of her friends. The other protagonist of this disaster is Fabian, my stepbrother. Fabian is 30 years old. My mother married his father when I was 10 years old. Fabian was always the golden boy, the biological son of a successful businessman. While I studied mechanics manuals and paid for my own courses, Fabian received gifted sports cars and jobs at his father's financial company. There was always a sick rivalry on his part. He needed to prove that he was superior to me in everything. I ignored him and focused on my own path, tolerating him only for the sake of peace in my mother's house during year-end dinners. The crack in the structure of my life appeared about 4 months before our wedding date. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Carolina called me at the shop complaining that her car's dashboard showed an engine warning light and that the touchscreen GPS kept restarting on its own. I told her to stop by the shop after leaving her office. She arrived, left the keys, and went to grab a coffee with some friends while I checked the vehicle. I connected my diagnostic equipment to the car's port. Indeed, there was an error in the telemetry and location module. To recalibrate the system, I had to download the location log for the last 3 weeks, looking for the exact point where the antenna had lost the signal. As I analyzed the coordinates on my monitor, my mechanic brain noticed a strange pattern. Carolina had told me that for the past 4 Friday afternoons she had been in a private neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, showing a huge property to some foreign clients. However, the car's satellite GPS history showed something completely different. On Fridays, at 6 in the evening, the vehicle was parked for exactly 3 hours in the 3rd basement of an apartment building in the most expensive area of our district. I knew that building. I was the one who installed a new battery in Fabian's SUV in that exact same basement 2 years ago. It was the building where my stepbrother lived. Any normal person would have felt an immediate shock and would have called their fiancé screaming. Not me. I felt a cold emptiness in my stomach, but I kept looking at the screen in silence. I took out my phone and logged into the metered parking app we shared on the family account. Carolina was so careless that she paid the parking meter for the visitor area of that building with the credit card that I covered every month. Nobody secretly visits their brother-in-law every Friday for 3 hours. The equation only had one possible result. Instead of confronting her, my mind went into deep diagnostic mode. I copied the entire GPS history onto a portable external drive. I deleted the log from the car's screen so she wouldn't suspect anything, adjusted the faulty sensor, and handed her the keys when she came back from coffee. I gave her a kiss on the forehead and told her the car was in perfect condition. She smiled at me, thanking me for being so helpful, without knowing that she had just handed me the complete blueprint of her own destruction. For the next 4 weeks, I lived a silent hell. I acted with terrifying normality. I made her breakfast, listened to her complaints about the real estate clients, and sat with her on the couch looking at flower catalogs for the wedding. She thought she had absolute control, that she was playing both sides without the stupid mechanic realizing it. In that month, I dedicated myself to gathering evidence and dismantling my financial exposure. One day, when she was taking a shower, I took her phone. I knew her unlock code was our dog's adoption date. I went into her photo gallery and went straight to the recently deleted folder. There they were. Photos of her in lingerie in the bathroom of Fabian's apartment. Screenshots of chats where Fabian told her how much he wished she would cancel the wedding, and she replied that she needed to secure my money first because Fabian's father had cut off his funds due to his bad investments. Fabian was almost bankrupt and hiding it, and Carolina was using me as her ATM while sleeping with him out of pure ego and attraction. She wrote him a message that was burned into my retina: I only put up with Javier because he's paying for the whole event. When we are married and have shared assets, I'll find a way to be with you. He is so predictable he'll never notice. I downloaded those screenshots and sent them to a secure email. I deleted the trail and left the phone exactly where it was. With the evidence in hand, I began to operate. I went to the joint bank account where we had the wedding funds. Since 80% of the money came from my shop's profits, I withdrew all my capital and transferred it to a maximum security individual account in my name. I left only the $800 she had contributed all year in the joint account. Then, I called the wedding vendors one by one. The banquet hall, the catering service, the photographer, and the music band. I invoked the early cancellation clauses. Since it was 3 months away, I lost a part of the initial deposit, but I managed to recover about $15,000. I told all of them that the wedding was cancelled due to force majeure and that they shouldn't contact Carolina under any circumstances. Finally, I went to the real estate agency that managed our apartment. The lease was in my name only. I executed the lease cancellation, assuming the corresponding penalty. The apartment had to be empty by the end of the month. I secured my money. I secured my exit. Now all that was left was the detonation of the engine. The following Friday, I told Carolina I had to travel to a neighboring city to attend an automotive scanner software update seminar. I told her I would be back Saturday morning. She said goodbye to me with an effusive hug, clearly excited to have the weekend free for her clandestine activities. I left the apartment with my suitcase, got into my truck, and drove a couple of blocks. I parked, turned off the engine, and waited. At 7 in the evening, I received a notification on my phone. I had placed a magnetic GPS tracker on the chassis of Carolina's car that same week. The tracker indicated that the vehicle had just arrived at Fabian's building. I waited another hour. I went to a fast food restaurant, ate a hamburger with astonishing calmness. Then, I drove to my stepbrother's building. Since I had fixed his father's car several times, the security guard knew me. I told him Fabian had asked me to bring up a heavy tool for him. The guard let me pass without announcing me. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The hallway was completely silent. I arrived at Fabian's door. I wasn't going to kick the door down, that's for idiots. I took out my professional lockpick set. In less than 20 seconds, the lock clicked and the door gave way. I entered the apartment stepping softly. Music was playing quietly in the living room. There were 2 half-finished glasses of wine on the kitchen island. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. I walked down the hallway. I stood in the doorway of the room. There they were, Carolina and Fabian, in bed, tangled in the white sheets. I stood leaning against the door frame, hands in my pockets, watching them. I didn't say anything. I just breathed audibly. Fabian was the first to react to the sound. He turned around, saw me standing in the doorway, and pure terror disfigured his face. He jumped back, clumsily covering himself with a pillow. Carolina turned around a fraction of a second later. When her eyes met mine, the blood drained from her face. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed. Javier, Fabian babbled, his voice trembling like a scared child's. Brother, this isn't what it looks like, I swear, isn't what it looks like. I replied, with a tone so calm it echoed in the room like a voice from beyond the grave. Okay, then I guess I'm looking at a routine suspension check of your mattress. Carolina reacted. Her narcissistic and manipulative instinct tried to take control. She wrapped herself in the sheet, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at me with a mixture of panic and defensive fury. She started trying to make me doubt my own sanity, resorting to her favorite tactic. You are to blame for this. She yelled at me, trying to deflect attention. You ignore me. You spend all day in that dirty shop and you never pay attention to me. Fabian listens to me, he understands me. I stood looking at her. The pathetic excuse of justifying a betrayal by blaming the person who worked to pay for her luxuries seemed fascinating to me from a psychological standpoint. Fabian, trying to recover a little of his supposed alpha male dignity, stood up, wrapped in a towel. Accept it, Javier. She prefers me. It was always like this. I can give her the standard of living she deserves, not a mechanic smelling of oil. Carolina, emboldened by Fabian's words, raised her chin, looking at me with disgusting contempt. She pronounced the phrase she thought would destroy my soul. I never wanted to marry you, Javier. I always wanted him. You were only convenient to pay the bills. They expected me to fall apart. They expected me to cry, to punch the wall, to beg for her love, or to lunge at Fabian with punches so they could call the police and play the victims. I didn't move a facial muscle. I took my cell phone out of my pocket, raised my arm, and took a clear, crisp picture of the two of them, together, in Fabian's bedroom. The flash illuminated their astonished faces. Okay, I told them simply. I put the phone in my pocket. Since you always wanted him, and he can give you the standard of living you deserve, I have excellent news for you, Carolina, I said, turning around to start walking down the hallway towards the exit. Your suitcase is packed at home. The wedding is cancelled, the apartment has been surrendered, and my bank account is empty. I hope you enjoy your life in my stepbrother's financial bankruptcy. Fabian turned pale upon hearing about his bankruptcy. He didn't know I was aware of his debts. Carolina screamed my name, but I was already walking through the front door. I left the apartment, went down the elevator, got in my truck, and went home. That same night, I picked up the suitcases with my things that I had already packed during the week. I left Carolina's things in stacked cardboard boxes at the entrance of the apartment. I printed the screenshots of their chats where they mocked me and talked about taking advantage of my money. I put everything in a giant manila envelope. I drove to my mother and stepfather's, Fabian's father's, house. Since it was midnight, I left the envelope in the main mailbox with a note that said, the reasons why there will be no wedding and why I no longer have a stepbrother. I went to live in a temporary hotel that same night. I blocked Carolina's number, Fabian's, my in-laws, and cut off all avenues of communication. I had already done my part of the work. Now, I just had to let the system collapse under its own weight. If you think leaving that room was the end of the story, you are completely wrong. If you want to know what the explosion was like the next day when debt and shame caught up with them, and how destiny gave me the perfect revenge years later, leave a comment because poetic justice takes time, but when it arrives, it destroys everything in its path. That Saturday morning, while I was drinking black coffee in the small kitchen of my temporary hotel, the phone started to get saturated. I had set it to forward everything to voicemail, and in less than 3 hours, the counter showed more than 80 missed calls. Fabian's father, my stepfather, is a ruthless businessman, one of those who doesn't tolerate incompetence or betrayal under his own roof. At 7 in the morning, he went out to get the newspaper and found my manila envelope in the mailbox. He opened the folder, reviewed the printed photographs, and read the transcripts of the messages. He saw his biological son naked in bed with the woman who was about to marry me. But what detonated the real nuclear bomb in that house was not just the infidelity, it was reading from Fabian's own words that he was drowning in debt, that he had lost his father's investors' money playing at being the Wolf of Wall Street, and that he planned to live at my expense using Carolina. At 10 in the morning, Carolina arrived at our old apartment. She probably expected to find me there, packing my things or crying on the couch so she could use her crocodile tears and manipulate me. But she ran head-on into a door that wouldn't open. The building concierge, following strict orders from management due to the lease cancellation, escorted her to the exit and pointed to the pile of cardboard boxes with her clothes and shoes right on the sidewalk. Her $30,000 wedding, her social status, and the man who paid for her whims had disappeared in a matter of hours. If you have any ideas on what I should do with the engagement ring she left on the nightstand before going to my stepbrother's apartment to roll around with him, leave them in the comments, I'll be reading them. I have a white gold ring with a 1-carat diamond that I need to purge from my existence. First update. Exactly 2 weeks have passed since the engine of my old life completely blew out. I thank everyone on Reddit who recommended I sell the ring and use the money to invest in my shop. I followed your advice to the letter, went to a jeweler, and bought a state-of-the-art automotive scanner that has tripled my clientele. The money that was going to be used for a fake wedding now generates real profits. The shockwave from that night shattered my abuser's theater. My stepfather called Fabian into his office first thing that very Monday. He put the photographs and account statements on the table. Without raising his voice, he fired him from the family financial company, legally disinherited him, and demanded that he vacate the apartment, which was in the company's name, in 48 hours. Fabian, the golden boy, was left on the street, without a job, without a reputation in the financial circle, and with a monstrous debt. Carolina, desperate upon finding herself without an apartment and learning that her millionaire lover was more broke than shattered glass, tried to save her skin. She sent me audios from a friend's phone crying her eyes out, saying that Fabian had forced her, that it was all a mistake. She invented an absurd story that Fabian had threatened her to sleep with him, but her version fell to pieces because in the chats she herself said she was only using me for my money. Nobody believed her. Not even her own parents, to whom I had already sent a copy of the file via email. Her parents, ashamed of having a gold-digging and adulterous daughter, closed their door to her. The perfect couple ended up renting a tiny room in a boarding house in the suburbs, because it was the only thing Fabian could afford with the few cash savings he had left. Second update. 8 months have passed since the detonation. Time puts every defective part back in its original place. My mechanic shop has grown to a level I never imagined. The mental peace of not having a parasite consuming my resources allowed me to focus 100% on work. I opened a second branch and now I have 12 employees under my charge. Silence in my life is my best arsenal against stress. I've heard very little about the traders, only what's necessary to confirm that karma doesn't rest. Fabian tried to look for work at other financial firms, but his father made sure to smear his name throughout the district. The great alpha male now works as a ride-sharing app driver, driving a rented car 14 hours a day just to eat. In his desperation, Fabian hacked an old email account of mine looking for my information to extort me, but found absolutely nothing other than auto parts newsletters. Mediocrity is his only company. Carolina had no better luck. At the luxury real estate agency, they found out about the scandal because she started arriving late, looking emaciated and wearing worn-out clothes. Since image is everything in that world, they fired her. She ceased to be the queen of luxury and now works as a telemarketer selling life insurance for miserable commissions. They lived together in that boarding house, hating each other, trapped in the misery they manufactured themselves by thinking they were smarter than me. I was cutting a copper wire with my electrician's knife when I found out about their situation through an old acquaintance. I felt exactly the same thing I feel when I throw a used oil filter in the trash. Nothing. Third update. 3 years have passed. 365 days multiplied by 3 of absolute and resounding peace. Today I write this from the balcony of the house I just bought. It has a huge garage, an immense garden, and there isn't a single pretentious ornament that I didn't choose. 2 years ago I met Michaela. She is an architect, a woman who has graphite-stained hands, who prefers a cold beer on the porch to a loud nightclub, and who tells the truth without anesthesia. We met in an industrial hardware store. We were both arguing with the salesman about the thickness of some stainless steel screws. The connection was immediate. There are no power games, no manipulation, and no absurd economic demands. We built a relationship based on steel loyalty. 3 months ago I proposed to her. She looked me in the eyes, smiled, and said yes, without asking for diamond rings or parties to impress people we don't care about. However, since my high-end mechanic shop business has become a very profitable franchise, I decided to give her the most spectacular and elegant wedding possible, but only for our true friends and family. My mother and stepfather, Fabian's father, are invited. The man asked me for forgiveness 1,000 times for the garbage he spawned, and our relationship grew stronger. Fabian, of course, does not exist to us. Life moves forward and the engine sounds perfect. Fourth update. For years after having walked down that hallway and finding them in bed. For years since she looked me in the face and told me I was only convenient for paying the bills. This is the last entry I will make in this forum, because destiny, in its infinite irony, gave me the most cinematic and brutal closure a man could desire. Last Saturday was my wedding to Michaela. We rented a spectacular estate on the outskirts of the city, a place surrounded by vineyards and mountains. We hired one of the most exclusive event and catering companies in the region. It was a perfect night. Lights illuminated the gardens, jazz music played in the background, and I was in my tailored suit, holding my wife's hand, surrounded by people who truly value us. Around 10 at night, I went towards the estate's parking area to get a special gift I had bought for Michaela that I kept in the trunk of my truck. As I walked towards my vehicle, I saw one of the event company's valets running to bring a guest's car. He wore the company's generic uniform, a reflective vest, and was sweating profusely. When he passed under the light of a street lamp, the guy stopped dead upon seeing me. It was Fabian, the golden boy, the millionaire businessman who was going to give Carolina the life she deserved, was working night shifts parking my guests' cars. His face was disfigured. His eyes widened in absolute shock. He was thinner, aged, with dark circles under his eyes and a hunched posture. He looked at my expensive suit, looked at the immense estate I had rented for my wedding, and the humiliation paralyzed him. I didn't say a word. I simply looked at him with the coldness of a glacier, pressed the button on my electronic key to open my truck, took my package, and turned around to return to the party. But the poetic justice wasn't over. I went back to the banquet area. I went towards the open bar to ask for a glass of water before returning to the main table. There was an assistant from the organizing company arranging the crystal glasses and cleaning the beverage table with a damp cloth. She wore a black apron, her hair tied back in a hairnet, and orthopedic work shoes. The woman looked up to take my order. It was Carolina. The wet cloth fell from her hands and landed on the floor with a dull thud. Her breathing stopped. Her eyes scanned my figure, the suit, the gold ring on my left hand, and then looked towards the dance floor, where Michaela, beautiful and radiant in her wedding dress, danced with her father under the crystal lights. The woman who told me she never wanted to marry me and who abandoned me because I didn't have enough status, was cleaning tables at my own wedding. Her face was a poem of pure pain, shame, and toxic envy. She realized, in a microsecond, that the man she despised for being a simple mechanic was now the owner of the life of luxury she always dreamed of, and that the man she left me for was outside sweating while parking my friends' cars. Okay, I told her, staring directly into her eyes without a single drop of empathy. 2 glasses of mineral water, please. And clean the floor, you dropped your cloth. Carolina lowered her head. Her hands trembled violently. A pathetic and suppressed sob escaped her throat as she bent down to pick up the dirty cloth from the floor. I took my glasses of water, turned my back on her, and walked toward my wife. I didn't look toward the bar again the whole night. The system is completely purged. The engine roars at maximum power and the road is clear. To all the stoic men who bear the weight of betrayal in silence, never doubt your own worth. The most devastating revenge does not require violence or screaming. It only requires that you become the best version of yourself and let time force them to watch from the trash as you touch the sky.